This court has seen criminals, liars, and cheats, Judge Reynolds said coldly, peering over his glasses. You, sir, look like all three. The courtroom went silent. Andre Carter didn't flinch. Standing in a tailored Navy suit with a leather briefcase in hand, he looked more like a Harvard law professor than a petty offender. But appearances didn't matter here, not in this town. Not in front of Judge Howard Reynolds, a man whose reputation for treating black defendants with contempt was whispered about but rarely challenged. Andre had come to contest a simple parking violation, one he believed was issued in error. What he didn't expect was the smug grin of the clerk as he walked in, or the sideways glances from the courtroom security. From the moment he stepped inside, he felt it, the weight of judgment, not based on law but on skin. He took a seat near the front, while the judge flipped through a thin file with his name on it. Andre Carter, is it? Judge Reynolds asked, already sounding irritated. You parked in a government-restricted zone last Thursday, correct? Yes, Your Honor, but I have documentation that proves. Don't interrupt me. The judge's gavel slammed down sharply, more for intimidation than order. We'll get to that. Andre nodded slowly, his jaw tight. He wasn't new to this kind of treatment, but it still burned. He had spent over a decade working in the justice system, seeing its flaws, navigating its cracks. But standing here today, it felt personal. A few people in the gallery snickered, enjoying the spectacle. The courtroom had become a place of entertainment for some, especially when a black man was in the defendant's chair. The bailiff handed Judge Reynolds a slip of paper. The judge looked it over with a raised eyebrow and scoffed. Oh, you tried to contest this by email? That won't work here, son. This isn't one of your big city offices. Andre remained calm. With all due respect, Your Honor, the ticket was issued while my government credentials were displayed on my dashboard. I was on duty, and the vehicle was parked legally under federal exception code. The judge laughed. Son, don't come in here talking about government codes. You think throwing around fancy words is going to get you out of this? I'm just here to clarify the facts. Well, I'm here to lay down the law, and the fact is, you broke it. The courtroom echoed with murmurs. Andre glanced around. The looks he got said it all. You're not welcome here. Doesn't matter what you say. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, squinting at him like he was trying to strip him down with his eyes. You people always think you're smarter than the law. Andre's expression didn't change, but inside, a storm brewed. He sat back down, opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Calm, collected, waiting, because he knew something they didn't, and the judge was about to find out. Judge Reynolds tapped his pen against the desk with a smirk as if he were preparing to swat a fly. Let's move this along. Mr. Carter, since you're so eager to defend yourself, let's hear your excuse. Andre stood again, lifting a document from his folder. Your Honor, this is a copy of my official federal assignment form for the date in question. I was performing an authorized investigation downtown, and my credentials were visibly displayed on the windshield. Federal, huh? The judge cut him off with a scoff. Do you know how many people walk in here claiming to be something they're not? You've got a good suit and a fancy tone, but I'm not impressed. I'm not here to impress you, sir. Just to present the facts. Reynolds' face twisted. Tone, Mr. Carter. That arrogance? It's not helping you. Andre remained composed. I apologize if it came off that way. My intent is simply to show I was parked legally under federal protection for government vehicles on official duty. The judge waved the paper away before even glancing at it. Sounds like a story. One of those long, complicated ones you people love to spin. A low wow echoed from the gallery. Andre took a slow breath, refusing to give the judge the reaction he seemed to be baiting. If you look at the parking ordinance, section 12B clearly states. I said enough, Judge Reynolds snapped, slamming the gavel again. You're not going to stand in my courtroom and tell me how to interpret the law. I've been doing this job since before you even learned how to spell ordinance. Andre locked eyes with him, unmoved. Then with all due respect, sir, you should know better. The tension crackled. Judge Reynolds chuckled bitterly, then leaned back in his chair. You know what? I was going to let you off with a warning. But clearly, you need to learn respect. He scribbled something down, tore it from a pad, and handed it to the clerk. You're fined $500. Due immediately. Next case. Gasps filled the room. $500 for a parking ticket? Even the bailiff blinked in surprise, but no one dared say a word. Andre didn't flinch. He gently closed his folder, then stepped forward. "Are you sure that's your final decision, Your Honor?" The judge rolled his eyes. "What are you gonna do, sue me?" Andre tilted his head. His voice was calm but carried a new edge. "I just want to make sure you're absolutely certain. Because once I leave this courtroom, there's no going back." Reynolds gave a dismissive wave. "Save the theatrics for someone who cares." Andre nodded once, turned, and walked slowly back to his seat, placing his briefcase gently beside him. He sat in silence. But his mind was already at work. Because the moment the judge had finalized that fine, he had unknowingly opened a door he'd soon regret. The courtroom buzzed as the next case was called, but no one was paying attention. All eyes kept darting back to Andre Carter. The calm, well-dressed black man who had just been hit with a $500 fine for daring to defend himself. Andre sat quietly, unfazed. He checked his watch. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stood. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but commanding. Judge Reynolds looked up with irritation. "Your case is over, Mr. Carter. If you can't pay the fine, the clerk will gladly assist you on your way out." Andre gave a faint smile. "I won't be paying anything today. But I do think there's something you ought to see first." Before the judge could respond, Andre reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim leather wallet. He opened it, revealing a gold badge and a federal ID. The room froze. "My name is Andre Carter, Senior Assistant United States Attorney. I'm with the Department of Justice, currently conducting an internal review of racial bias and judicial misconduct in small-town courts. Today, you became part of that review. You could have heard a pin drop." The judge's face turned a pale shade of red. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Andre continued, "I was sent here undercover after complaints were filed against your courtroom. Biased rulings, disproportionate fines, disrespectful treatment toward minority defendants." The bailiff's eyes went wide. The clerk looked down, suddenly avoiding eye contact. "And judging by what just happened here," Andre said, holding up the fine the judge had scribbled, "those complaints appear to be well-founded." The judge stammered, sitting up straighter. Why didn't you say who you were from the beginning?" Andre's expression hardened. "Because I wanted to see how you treat people who can't flash a badge. The kind of people who walk in here expecting fairness but leave humiliated and broken. People who don't get the benefit of the doubt, just the weight of your assumptions." "I didn't know. You weren't supposed to." The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Andre slowly stepped forward and placed the badge on the edge of the bench, directly in front of Judge Reynolds. "I'll be filing my full report by end of day. I'd advise you to start reviewing your past cases because this investigation is just beginning." Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the badge, staring at it like it was a ghost. Andre turned and addressed the courtroom. "Justice should never depend on how someone looks, where they're from, or the color of their skin. This courtroom just failed that test. But I won't." With that, he picked up his briefcase and walked out, leaving behind a stunned courtroom and a panicked judge who now realized he hadn't just disrespected a black man, he had disrespected the very system he claimed to uphold. Judge Reynolds sat frozen on the bench, still staring at the federal badge as though it might vanish if he blinked. The authority it carried hit him like a freight train, swift and undeniable. He looked up slowly. The courtroom that had once felt like his personal kingdom now felt hostile, unfamiliar. Whispers rippled through the gallery like waves crashing against stone. "Did you hear that? He's a federal prosecutor. I knew that fine was messed up. Reynolds is done." The judge's mouth was suddenly dry. He reached for his water glass with a shaky hand and took a sip. The bailiff approached the bench quietly. "Everything all right, Your Honor? Do I look all right?" Reynolds snapped, then immediately regretted it. His voice had cracked with fear, not authority. He cleared his throat and banged his gavel, though it sounded more like a plea than a command. "Everyone, please maintain order. We're continuing with the docket." But no one was listening. Even the next defendant, an older white man, looked at the judge with unease, as if questioning whether this man still held any power at all. Reynolds rushed through the next case, stumbling over legal terms he had said 1,000 times before. He tried to focus, but Andre Carter's voice echoed in his mind. "You weren't supposed to know who I was." Those words cut deeper than the badge. Because they revealed the truth he'd been avoiding for years, he judged people before they ever spoke. He saw skin color first, character last, if at all. After adjourning early, Reynolds retreated to his chambers and slammed the door. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and searched for Andre Carter's name. Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney. Washington, D.C. Division. Department of Justice. It was all real, all official. God, he muttered, sinking into his leather chair. He stared at the portrait of himself hanging on the office wall. For the first time, he couldn't recognize the man in the frame. The phone rang. It was the court administrator. Judge Reynolds, you'll want to be aware Mr. Carter's visit is already making the rounds online. There's talk of a formal investigation. Reynolds didn't answer. He already knew. This wasn't going away. He hadn't just embarrassed himself in court, he'd exposed the rot beneath the robe. A knock came at the door. It was the bailiff again. Sir, a reporter's here. Wants to ask about Mr. Carter's badge. Reynolds didn't move. His jaw clenched. His reign of unchecked power had cracked wide open in one afternoon. And the man he thought he could belittle? The man he'd mocked and fined? He had the power to destroy everything. Because justice hadn't just walked into his courtroom. It had come to take names. By the next morning, the courthouse parking lot was flooded, not with cars, but with cameras, reporters, and protesters holding signs that read, "Justice, not prejudice. Judges must be accountable. We stand with Andre Carter." The video from the courtroom had gone viral overnight. Someone in the gallery had recorded the entire exchange, the disrespect, the excessive fine, and the stunning badge reveal. News anchors across the country were playing clips on repeat. A federal prosecutor was humiliated in court simply for being black. This isn't just misconduct, it's a symptom of a broken system. Judge Reynolds watched it all unfold from his office TV, pale and speechless. He hadn't left the courthouse. He didn't want to face the cameras or the consequences. His phone buzzed again. District Judicial Ethics Board. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Even his staff had gone quiet, barely meeting his eyes. The same people who once laughed at his crude remarks or nodded along when he dismissed young black defendants were now distancing themselves like he carried a contagious disease. At a nearby press conference, Andre Carter stood behind a podium flanked by other federal officials and local activists. "This is not just about me," he said. "This is about every young man and woman who's walked into that courtroom and felt small, silenced, and invisible. I have the badge and the platform to speak out. But thousands don't. That ends now." The crowd erupted in cheers. Back at the courthouse, Reynolds turned away from the screen. The words "that ends now" echoed in his ears like a final sentence. He shuffled through a stack of papers, years of rulings, most of which he couldn't remember. Were they fair? Biased? He didn't know anymore. He hadn't cared enough to ask. He opened his laptop and began drafting a letter. Not because he wanted to, but because the writing was already on the wall. "Effective immediately, I am taking a leave of absence pending the investigation into my conduct." He paused. His pride tried to stop him. But his legacy was already stained. Outside, a local news anchor gave a live report. Sources say the DOJ may begin auditing dozens of Judge Reynolds' past cases. Some may even be reopened. Inside, Reynolds buried his face in his hands. The robe that once made him feel powerful now felt like a shroud. He had spent years demanding respect from those who entered his courtroom, but never giving it. And now, for the first time in his long career, he was the one being judged. Not by the court, not by the law, but by the people. 2 weeks had passed. Judge Reynolds, now simply Mr. Reynolds, sat alone in his dimly lit home office, staring blankly at the glowing screen of his laptop. The robe was gone, the courtroom off limits. His gavel had been boxed away along with his nameplate, now collecting dust on a shelf no one would visit. Every day since the incident, headlines had swarmed in. Federal prosecutor exposes racist judge. DOJ opens investigation into judicial misconduct. Reynolds' past rulings face scrutiny. And now, the unthinkable had happened. Multiple public defenders had filed motions to reopen dozens of cases overseen by Reynolds. Cases where black and minority defendants received unusually harsh sentences for minor infractions. Andre Carter's team had been working nonstop, quietly reviewing transcripts, court footage, and hearing recordings. The findings weren't just troubling, they were damning. The pattern was undeniable. Oversentencing, disproportionate fines, condescending language. In one hearing, Reynolds had told a teenage boy who stole a loaf of bread, "You people always have an excuse. It's time you learn real consequences." Now that quote was being blasted on social media with the caption, "Real consequences? Coming full circle." Meanwhile, Andre remained professional and composed, avoiding interviews and refusing to grandstand. But behind the scenes he was everywhere, consulting with the Department of Justice, reviewing complaints, coordinating with watchdog groups. His quiet strength was what made the impact even more powerful. At a town hall meeting, he spoke for just 5 minutes, but every second carried weight. "We're not looking for revenge," Andre said. "We're looking for reform. We want courts where justice is blind, not where judgment is based on skin tone." His words stirred not just the crowd, but a growing movement. Local leaders were now calling for mandatory anti-bias training for all judges and staff. A civil rights group had launched a campaign to provide legal aid for victims of judicial discrimination, and families who once felt voiceless were finally being heard. Back at home, Reynolds looked out his window. Across the street, a mural was being painted on a brick wall. He squinted to see. It was a portrait of Andre Carter, surrounded by symbols of justice: scales, a gavel, and an American flag. Above his image, the words, "Dignity cannot be fined." Reynolds sighed, heavy with the weight of his own past. He once believed he held absolute power in the courtroom. But Andre had proved something more powerful: character, integrity, and truth. No badge, no robe, no podium could outshine those. And now, even without ever raising his voice or demanding fear, Andre had done what few could. He'd brought justice to a judge. Months passed, and the ripple effects of that one courtroom encounter spread farther than anyone expected. Judge Reynolds officially resigned, citing health and personal reasons, though the public knew better. His past rulings were under review, his reputation in ruins. No public apology, no final words, just a quiet exit from a system he once ruled with unchecked arrogance. But while one career ended, another legacy was just beginning. Andre Carter stood before a packed auditorium at a law school where he'd been invited to speak. Young students filled every seat, eager to hear from the man who had calmly dismantled injustice with dignity and truth. "I didn't walk into that courtroom looking for trouble," Andre told them. "I walked in hoping to be treated with the same respect I've spent my life giving to others. But sometimes you have to hold up a mirror and show the system what it's become." Applause erupted. He continued, "Justice isn't about robes or gavels. It's about fairness, integrity, seeing people for who they are, not who you assume they are." His story had already inspired policy changes across the state. Training programs for judges were revamped. Courtrooms began installing cameras to ensure transparency. And perhaps most important, more people of color were being encouraged to pursue careers in law, not just as defendants or plaintiffs, but as defenders of justice. Back in the small town where it all started, that mural of Andre still stood tall. Tourists took photos. Locals pointed it out to their kids. And every now and then, someone would stop and just stare, reflecting on how a single moment of courage could spark a movement. Andre never gloated, never sought revenge. He simply believed in something most people had forgotten. That true justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs to show up. And he showed up when it mattered most. What would you have done in that courtroom? Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their power or stand up against it? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, just like Andre's did. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Let's keep the conversation going. And let's never stop fighting for what's right, because justice isn't just a courtroom thing. It's a human thing.